Welcome to Herbal Explorations, a podcast hosted by Wilson Lau of New Herbs. Each week, we speak to leading experts about what's happening in the herbal industry.
Hi, I'm Suzanne Shelton, and I am here with Wilson Lau doing our first recording of his newsletter he's done for a long time, From the Field. So he sends that out to his customers and colleagues, and we thought it would be interesting to talk more about some of the information that he shares this time. So here we are in July of 2023. So Wilson, what do you see as the top issue today?
The top issue today is the increase of prices of Chinese herbs for a variety of reasons. As a specialist focusing on Chinese herbs, I think that's the biggest headline is the prices of almost all herbs are up, and it's just continuing march upwards as we go. It hasn't sort of let up yet.
Is it all herbs or just some, and how much more expensive?
It is almost all herbs. I've never seen this in my 20-something years in the industry, is that almost every single herb is up. And it's shocking because, at the low end, it's only maybe up 10, 15%. But at the high end, it's 3, 4x. And, it's not all concentrated at the bottom. If it was, it would be less of a story and headline.
So what's causing this?
There's a couple of issues. I think, as most Americans know, based on their own experience, we're seeing inclement weather, extreme weather patterns. Probably most of us are in a heat wave of some sort, or experienced one recently in the US. So weather is one factor. Labor is another factor. And I think, with labor, it's COVID driven, right? We're still sort of seeing the effects of COVID there because some people have retired, some people have died, and some people have gone back to the village. So the workforce is shrunken, willing to work in our segment of the industry, and the know-how has disappeared, some of the know-how, because seeming like processing herbs, you would think, oh, it's really easy to do, how hard could it be? But it's like, you and I both love food and going out to restaurants. It's like having a real good prep cook or hiring someone that can barely cut, right? It's two different rates of action going on there. And then the last and not least is human behavior, right? I think there's a lot of money still in the system, and it's sort of sloshing around trying to find a home to make money.
So the labor shortage sounds serious. What do you see any prospective solutions for that? Or are there more details you can share?
I think the labor shortage is a very serious issue. I think there's a couple of things going on. First, China has a policy to sort of increase the wages of laborers over time because they want to lift people out of poverty and really get them into a more fair or earning status so they can afford more. And this is sort of the policy of China overall. So the floor has been rising. And, that's 5-6% a year, not really that much to write home about. I think more importantly, as I alluded earlier to, is the know-hows due to COVID as the aging workforce ages out. Some of the know-how has been lost. And the younger generation does not want to do this type of work. I think that's worldwide. That's a worldwide phenomenon. And then thirdly, some of our materials are well-crafted. And as we were talking about it with the Sustainable Herb Program and sort of going over different things, it doesn't matter if you're in Africa, Eastern Europe, Latin America, or China, the average age of a wow crafter is 40 something plus. And that, that's just not average, but the floor, right? Like the floor is 40, right? And it only goes up, right? Sure, there's some young people that come in and help out here and there or do it, but it's basically up there. And as wild resources become less bountiful, for example, when you sort of hear stories about even in the US, um, my father-in-law owned a farm and there was berries to be picked without having them grown, basically wild crafted berries on the farm way in the back area because they didn't grow stuff there. They were really like, for horses and whatnot. Um, but there's a lot of it, right? But as over time, as development and over harvesting, what used to be you can gather 20 pounds in a 1 mile radius or half a mile radius. Now you might have to go to 2, 3 mile radius. So it's also the cost of labor and the number of people doing it will result in a lower yield, thus a higher price, especially if demand's increasing.
Well, that makes sense. It's also disheartening. And I know that we've had conversations at some of the American Herbal Products Association's herbal conferences about with the changing weather patterns, it's harder for wildcrafters because if they're always harvesting herb X the first week of May and they get there and they've already missed it, that can throw off their whole, harvesting schedule for the various wildcrafted botanicals and fungus. So it's not
Yeah,
looking
that's
good.
weather, and then also natural disasters like in Sichuan province during the peak season, there was an earthquake, and then it caused a lot of places to become unstable. So then no one's going to go out and risk their life unless
Right.
they have to, right?
Right.
But if they can have a choice, they rather not make that money this year and wait until next year or make it some other way.
Right. That makes total sense. Can't blame them at all. All right. Well, this is disheartening. Is there any good news, Wilson, about the supply chain?
Good news is that there's material available, and you just have to know where to look for it, and that's the good news. So if you need it or can pay for it and can afford it, you can have it. Secondly, the Chinese yuan has depreciated against the dollar, so some of these increases have been offset by that. And then we also have the good news is shipping rates have normalized back to almost the original rates, maybe not quite as low, but very similar. So we're also getting some relief from that, especially on the items where shipping was a large percentage of the price, meaning the lower price items.
Mhm.
So if you bought $1 thing and if the herb costs $1 a pound or two something a kilo, and shipping was 50 cents a kilo, and now it goes back down. So even it goes up 10, 15%, but you save between currency and that, it might even be cheaper. But that is the exception and not the case. Dollars to dollars, the landed cost is more for almost all herbs. But there are situations where even the herb has gone up in price. You actually might pay less for it, but that isn't the rule, right? For example, I'll give you an example of something that we do carry. Price has gone down or up, has basically remained the same. Is hibiscus because we're paying so much to ship the whole flower around, almost 50, 60 cents a kilo. Now, we get that savings and then some currency appreciation. So even though at origin denominated in local currency, the cost of the material has gone up, but the landed cost in the US or Europe is actually very similar.
Okay. Well, it's good news about the shipping. I remember our conversations that we had during the COVID lockdown when it was like every time we spoke, the cost of shipping had gone up another gazillion percent. And just crazy increases. And the shipping companies made a lot of money. So, yeah.
Yeah, and things weren't getting there on time because you never knew when you could get a container
Right.
and that whole
Right.
game.
Well, it was totally unpredictable. So, is the supply? I mean, that was one of the main things we talked about for a year and a half. It's like
Mm.
how unpredictable the supply chain was. So, is the supply chain still as unpredictable as it was, or anywhere near?
I think the supply chain is not as unpredictable because logistics has eased. I think where supply chain becomes an issue is for people that have not done forward contracting and locked in prices and material. Um, so if you're spot buying and you need a qualified material, so if a customer comes to me and says all of a sudden, I need 10,000 kilos of herb X, right? If I don't have it in inventory, or whether it's here or China, then I have to go out and find it for them. But by the time I QC and QA the material, the cost of the material might have risen, and my partner may not be willing to honor that price. And do you buy material um, and own the material, test it, and risk of failure, and then have to sell it, return it. So there's different ways to deal with it, but it is because the price is moving so quickly. If you're spot buying and don't have the relationships, it's going to be really hard for you to fulfill qualified material to people's specifications.
Well, it sounds like the advice you've been giving all along, that people need to have good relationships with suppliers and communicate about what they anticipate their needs to be and forecast out longer, still stands. That has not changed.
No, it hasn't changed. And I think it's more important than ever with the extreme weather patterns and the fluctuation in the marketplace. You really need a partner who understands what's going on the ground and help you come up with the strategies, right? For some items, I'm telling my customers, hey, let's just roll the dice. And the reason why I say that is you're at an all-time high. And when I mean, all-time high, I mean, where the cost of the material is just gives you a almost like a punch in the stomach, right? High. Like, are you going to discontinue this item or temporarily or permanently because it's so high? And it's one of those things that if you can make it float by, right now may not be the time to make that commitment to that material, especially if harvest is only 2 months away or so. Can we wait till harvest, see what happens? And at the worst, you may be paying more for air shipment if the prices stay consistent. But you also have the opportunity for prices to come down, and you have to really know the marketplace, talk to the farmers, and sort of understand what this year's harvest is going to look like. Are people still acting, trying to control that marketplace according to the marketplace, and really understanding multiple layers of information and sort of getting it from your partner who's supplying you the herbs to really help you come to a decision that is reasonable and that you can live with.
Okay, that
It's
makes
not a
sense.
one-size-fit-all strategy.
Anything else that people should be looking at or starting to think about for the future?
I I think there's two things that I think that we have to think about. One is human behavior. Is money going to come in from other sectors, or bigger players in our sector trying to make money by doing things that aren't common or predictable? And I'll give you an example that was recently in the news. Cargill recently took of the delivery of their cocoa contracts, which means that all of a sudden the people that sold those contracts had to find cocoa somewhere, a physical cocoa to fill, to sort of deliver to Cargill, right? Usually with these forward contracts, um, people aren't expecting to actually deliver the goods. They're just sort of meant to be a hedge instrument to sort of protect your upside or downside, however you look at it. But all of a sudden they said, "Hey, I want my cocoa," and it caused a big scramble, and that was in the news maybe a week ago, and it caused a spike in the price of cocoa. So I think with inclement weather and increased demand, it may be that people actually need material versus they're just using it as a hedge instrument in that market in that instance. But I think with the extreme weather around the world, that we'll see a lot more failed crops or nearly failed crops, and it's just going to happen more and more worldwide. I don't think it's a U.S., China, Europe, Latin America thing. It's going to happen all over the world because
Global.
last week I think there was the hottest temperatures experienced across three different continents. Cities in three different continents
Yeah.
all recorded the highest temperature they ever seen. So
Yeah.
this weather, inclement weather, extreme weather, there's going to be more and more of it. And as there's more of it, what strategies do you have in place to sort of protect against, going out of stock in your supply chain? So I think there has to be people really have to have a sustainability strategy and also thinking about how can you tackle and help address some of these climate change issues and proactively as a company, not only on the sourcing side, but also how to make the world better and,
Yeah.
cleaner. So,
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've been thinking about is with these extreme temperatures, I think a lot of people don't understand that it is really life threatening. It's not that you're just going to be miserable; it's you can die. And with hyperthermia, you don't realize you're in trouble until it's pretty much too late. So that's going to probably be a factor in the agricultural sector as well. So I'm hoping these companies are, we're talking about forward thinking. I'm hoping that these agricultural entities are forward thinking about how they're not going to, how they're going to protect their agricultural workers from these extreme temperatures that we're all reading about and some of us experiencing.
yeah, and the thing is that with weather change and weather patterns and everything else, is also some of the places that traditionally produce these herbs, especially in the warmer climates, have become so warm that during the day they can't go out and work,
Yeah.
during part of the day, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I was just in the car, I was listening to the news, and it's not funny, but the image of someone doing it is sort of hilarious, is that these construction workers had to hose each other down. One person's working, the other one's hosing the person down with water to keep them cool. And that image seems so ridiculous, right? But that's sort of is happening
Where we're
in the
at.
US.
Well, that's, I think, a really good example of the fact that we're all going to be adapting to
Mhm.
this new world we're in. And that is a very simple way of adapting to this heat can kill you, but you still have to get these things done. So finding a simple way to do it, as long as you have water.
Yeah. Which is a different issue, right? Then
Yeah,
that's
I
the
mean,
issue is
adaptation is going to be the name of the game.
yeah. And
It sounds like.
it's horrible, right? And I think,
Yeah.
but as an industry, we really have to look at everyone in the supply chain and how to make sure that everyone's taken care of and everyone's has getting a livable wages and livable conditions and humane working conditions and all these things that we need to ensure that in the supply chain. And back to cocoa, although we don't sell it, we know a lot of the issues and child labor and whatnot in the cacao supply chain.
Yeah.
So I think we all needed to figure out how to work collaborative together as a team to sort of improve things overall.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just the right thing to do morally and ethically, but it's the right thing to do in terms of consumers that are expecting ethical behaviors, fair trade, attention to sustainability from the companies whose products they're buying from. And let's face it, if you can't get anybody to work for you, you can't produce products. So to me, that's an everybody wins when we take care of the entire business community. But that's just how I look at it. I know that there's people that are let's exploit everyone.
Yeah.
So, but as always, Wilson, when we're talking about sort of the state of the world and the supply chain, even though you just said the supply chain is less unpredictable than it was, I have a feeling that for all of the years we will be talking about the supply chain, there will always be an element of unpredictability that we'll be discussing. Fair
Yeah,
guess?
I think you're definitely hit it on the head, right? I think no matter how much we aim to have a healthy people, healthy ecosystem, and healthy soil, there's always going to be surprises that pop up. In the best of times and the worst of times, you know, farming is a very, very tough thing.
Yeah.
And I think the key is that we need to see what we can do to weather some of these unpredictable situations and come and make it and smooth things out. I think, how do you, just like budgeting, right? There's some months that you're gonna make more, some years you're gonna make more money and some years you're gonna make less money, but you gotta budget and help smooth things out so that things are more normalized versus having these huge swings up and down.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and make sure that it's worth the while of people to continue cultivating and harvesting the products that our industry relies on.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds like a good thing to be committed to. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate your describing your latest observations, notes from the field to me, and I look forward to hearing about the next one in a few months.
Have a wonderful day.
Thanks for listening. To learn more about the business of herbs and botanicals, visit newherbs.com. To keep listening to great episodes, be sure to subscribe to this podcast in iTunes, Google Play, Amazon, or Spotify, and make sure to give us a rating too.